Welcome to listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan, a podcast about the art and hobby of miniature painting. I'm Mike, and thank you so much for joining us on our continued quest to become better, braver, happier painters. So it's been about 2 weeks since we've had an episode out, and I apologize for that. Unexpectedly, I came down with bronchitis, and you can probably hear that in my voice. Right now, I figured we would try to jump on and put out an interview because, right now I'm not coughing every 2 seconds. So anyways, you also notice that you'll probably hear snoring dogs in the background. Well, like I said, this is an opportunistic moment for me to get an episode out. And we are really pleased today to have an interview with Brice Cocanour. He is a fantastic artist from the Midwest. I had an opportunity to meet him at ReaperCon and also have some conversations with him as well. He actually judged one of my pieces, which was interesting because that comes out into the interview, and we get to hear his thoughts, etc., on how I did, what I could improve on, and things that he was looking for. So that was really awesome, and I got to tell you, it's invaluable feedback, and I really appreciate him taking the time to talk to us. So without further ado, we present our conversation with Brice Cocanour. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on with us today.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I feel privileged. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and I think it's pretty wonderful.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm going to tell Dan now we're up to 8 listeners. I'll
even email you.
Oh, awesome. We greatly, and we will read that email on air. I promise. So Brice, we got a chance to very briefly meet at ReaperCon, which was an amazing experience. It was my first ReaperCon. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got into this hobby and let our listeners know?
Oh, absolutely. I think it started back. I was started playing D&D with some friends, and I happened to be in Carson City doing Cub Scout day camps. And we'd gotten done at the end of the day, and somebody said, "Hey, let's go over to this guy's house." And we went to this guy's house, and he had a little glass thing on his desk, and he was painting miniatures. I said, "There's miniatures that go along with these things?" And right then I was hooked, and it was pretty cool because he actually offered to paint a kobold for me. And he sent it to my house later. And that sort of started that. And then we, looking in my friend had a subscription to Dragon magazine, and he got, there was advertisements in it for this Games Workshop company. And so then we started playing Rogue Trader. And then a little bit later, Warhammer came out. We thought that was great. And so 6 of us got in, and we all shared a box because you get 10 figures. There are 6 different armies, and you get 10 figures. So we all split them up, and I got stuck with Skaven. And so we started that, and then began playing in some tournaments. And we went to one of the grand tournaments at Games Day. And that was the first time I entered a paint contest. And at that point, I was feeling pretty good about myself and thinking, I can probably win something. And then, in the recesses of your mind's like, maybe it's good enough to even win a sword, and you just, hopeful thinking here. So we entered that and didn't get to really look at the entries too much because we were playing the tournaments. And then it was pretty discouraged when I noticed I didn't even make first cut. And I was so discouraged that I ended up not painting for an entire year after that. Because I went in thinking I was pretty good, and I wasn't. And then once that wore off after a year, I had to figure out I needed to get over myself and not be prideful, and figure out if I can learn some things to be able to paint better. And during that time, it was pretty hard to, because there was no videos. There was
the dark ages.
Yeah, it was dark age. Yeah, it was back a few years ago, and there was no books. There was no videos. And people guarded their secrets pretty tightly, and it was hard to figure some things out. Besides the White Dwarf magazine, but it was definitely a GW style and hard to learn a lot of things besides dry brushing.
Yeah.
And then started going to some of the other games days. I remember in 2000, Victor Hardy I'd wait after the competitions, and he'd won with his large demon model, and he'd painted lots of lines, and they were all highlighted really cool. And you could wait after, and you could, ask him a quick question when they picked their model up, because you never knew who the guy was. And I remember the next year, I remember Bobby Wong had won everything, and I had just waited to see who was going to pick up the models. And he was nice enough he stopped and he talked to me and explained how he did some things. And there was numbers on one of the shoulder pads, and he said he'd used a label, but it was interesting because you couldn't see the edges of the label. So I had to ask him about that. And he said, well, I used the decal softener and decal set. Mm-hmm. And then that makes those sort of lines disappear. And so you're always just, waiting and trying to, glean some information from these guys who won and see if, maybe they can rub off on you a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And I think back back to when I started, because I was a Rogue Trader beginner as well. I never actually played the game, but I did have the first box of the Space Marines. But I remember picking up that first white drawer and reading where they had a little section on heavy metal painting and being like, what language is this in? They're talking about washes, and I had no idea what any of that type of stuff was. And especially it would throw me when they're like, I used an ink wash, and I'm like, did you break open a pen, like a black pen or something? And just I had no idea what any of that stuff was. So it's just always, I'm glad to hear of other people that kind of started in that world too, where there was no YouTube, there was no and it really was. I remember actually talking to somebody else talking about how they didn't want to share really, and most artists just kind of everything was kept close to the vest. They didn't talk about the processes or anything along those lines. So it's very interesting how much the community has changed,
Oh, absolutely. It was totally that way. And I'm glad it has changed. And I've made an effort to, if people ask or curious, I will, help them. Mm-hmm. I think that sort of happened. I had a new guy named Caleb Wisenbach.
Yeah.
Came to our store and he was a new painter. And the store owner said, hey, could you sit down and just teach him some stuff? And so we quickly became friends, and I just taught him everything I knew, and he was a better painter than me within a year. So I was like, it's amazing what happens when you can get some help along the way.
Wait, okay. So we always blame Caleb and Kat for Dan and I. So you're to blame for Caleb?
I think Caleb's to blame for Caleb, but I was just helpful creating the craziness, I guess.
Oh yeah, no, it's amazing how small this world of miniature painting is, and how I noticed because I'm nosy when I do, but before I interview a guest, I do research them. And so I did notice in your Facebook feed and such, you're mentioned by other guests that we've had, like James Craig and, but there's also Dallas Kemp and stuff you've worked with Privateer Press, and then all the Reaper stuff you've done. And, of course, Michael Proctor is a really good friend of the show. And so it's just wow, it's such a small world, And then I saw your dinner, I was laughing because I was I saw the picture of you guys sitting and eating dinner with Alfonso. And I'm like, oh my God, I know 6 of the people in that, that picture too, it's such a small, funny little world. You know what I mean?
Oh, I think those are the best things when you get to go to dinner and just sort of hang out with people. And those are probably my favorite things.
Absolutely.
Going to games days and having time after. I mean, I remember the year we had Team North America, where we did all the Primarchs. And that happened the year before. I was just sort of waiting around and, seeing if I could glean information from any of the winners. And, Chris Bohr and Joe Ortiz were there, and they were talking about this big project they were going to do next year. And I was like, okay, I'm going to butt in on this one. And awesome. they were kind enough my heroes were kind enough to let me in on it. And we all got to choose different Primarchs and got them ready for the next year. It was sort of overkill because we had a ton of entries that, all could have won, major awards, but it was pretty fun. But the best thing after was we got to go over to David Powell's house after. He invited us to his house, and everybody was there. And I remember, and Jen Haley was there, and there was all these pieces
Mhm.
and they just put them all on the dining room table, and you got to just sit around and just actually look at them, because at the games days it's really hard to see them because they're behind these very scratched plexiglass things and it's hard to see everything. But you could actually touch everybody's miniatures and look at them, and well, not touch them but hold them
Right.
and have a look. And I just think that is just the best thing ever.
Yeah, and that it's funny. Again, there's another name too, David Powell. That when I first got introduced into my Games Workshop, people in our local store were like, "You got to go to Nova Open, take a painting class, see what it's like." And so I did, and it was like, a circus to me. I'd never been to this type of con, and then I saw kind of Roman Laplace display and went, this is not even the same thing that this is nothing like I ever imagined in miniature painting, right? Like it was kind of world changing. And then when I started digging, I was like, oh my God, look at there's all these incredible American or European artists. Are there any American ones? And the first one I came across was David Powell. And I was like, holy crap. Yeah, there you go. And then the killer is that apparently he lived in my area for a very long period of time, was a member of this group that I'm now a member of called the National Capital Model Soldier Society. And I guess I missed him by like 1 year. I was like, damn it, I would have loved to sat and paint with him for like an hour or just watch him paint, Because yeah, he's such an incredible artist. So many, like there's so many out there now. It's amazing. But let's focus on you a little bit more. So you decided, like you had that year break because you did do as well as you wanted to. I believe me, can appreciate, and that hits way close to home. So now that you're on this path that you want to become a better painter, what were some of the challenges that you faced when you started that down that road?
I think the hardest thing is getting to the point where you can accept criticism and maybe step back and look at your art, because a lot of times you spent a lot of time on these things, so it's very hard to receive positive comments and things that will help you make it better, and then even to figure out what they're talking about. I mean, with Alfonso's class, it's like drinking from the fire hose.
Yeah.
And then so now a few years later, now I'm finally figuring out some of the things he was talking about. So then it's just a determination to be able to, I know that I can get better, and I'll watch everybody's videos. I'll watch other people, because I will always pick up things that I didn't know that they do better than me. And I think you can always improve. And I think it's just a process of continually improving and seeing how you can do that.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that's interesting, is that there is some form of muscle memory with it, like learning how to edge highlight, and even the simplest techniques are always good to continually practice. Right. But those are things. All right. So they're not always simple to everybody, like our motto, our motto is better, braver, happier painters. But I don't know if you've heard in other parts of the podcast, the original motto was, we suck at painting, so you don't have to. Actually,
I went to a painting clinic with Jeremy Bonamont. I decided, because I started taking classes, and I had gone to his class before, but I went to another one, and I brought a model that I was working on for Games Day, and I showed it to him, and I thought I was pretty far along, looked pretty good. And he looks at it, he's like, "Where's the light? I don't know where the light is. You cannot fix this." And so one of the guys in the class, they actually had a bottle of Simple Green, and they put a sticker on top of it, and it said, "I suck." And so he just handed it to me.
I feel your pain. I feel your pain for sure. It's one of those things that it's all like, one of the biggest challenges has always been for me self-awareness. And I know there are some things painting wise I do pretty well, but a lot of times I can't gauge where I am. You know what I mean? Like that's like ReaperCon this year was a total mind blow for me. I had no idea how any of the stuff was going to pan out. And so I was I went in with zero expectations, which was good. That's always the best thing. But I would have to say I had never gone into a painting competition with zero expectations before. And so and it's always humbling to see all those other pieces. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, mine's nowhere near as good as that. Or, I sit there and go, that's better. That's better. Wait, I've just pointed out every other model in the show.
I know I feel the same way. I think I've stepped it up and I'm doing really good. And then you get there and it's like, oh, these are amazing.
Like, I think I might ship these back home instead of put them on the table. But okay, so learning how to take constructive criticism was one of the things that you struggled with. Was there any, or not struggled with, but was a challenge? Were there any techniques that you found particularly challenging? Like, I know for me, non-metallic metal is going to be the bane of my existence as long as I'm a painter. And so I just didn't know if there's something for you that you felt similar.
I think it's part of it is a lot of like Jeremy would demonstrate things, or Matthew Fontaine to demonstrate things, and it didn't always click right away. And I sort of have to learn it. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, and so a lot of artists go, oh, you just add blue to it, it's all better, and it's like, okay, what's the recipe? But I'm finally learning. At first it had to be recipes for me and learning techniques, and then slowly it became to, okay, so now what looks good and what creates a feeling, and that was just sort of a learning process for me. But I think that it can be learned.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because it's 50-50 who we talk to. So, like, I would say half of our guests have an artistic background and half have none whatsoever. And and I'm one of those weird mutants where when I was younger, I had some artistic background because that's the direction I wanted to go. And then my parents kind of beat that out of me because they're like, poverty, artist equals poverty. And so, like, I stopped all my art in high school, and then didn't come back to it till I was in my 40s. So, nice little gap of stuff. And so it's interesting to hear, like, so a mechanical engineer by training, how do you think that has helped or hindered you in this world of miniature painting?
Oh, I think it's helped a lot. I need to have a desire to modify everything I buy practically, especially the old, GW stuff. Everything was very linear to put into a 2-part mold. Mm-hmm. And so my goal was always to change it enough so that it couldn't be molded.
I gotcha. Okay.
And so I think that sort of does that, and I think just the ability to learn and observe things that come from sort of a science background, I think, are very helpful. And so I don't think it hinders at all, but it's been more of a help, I think.
Nice. Now does that because of that background, do you enjoy basing or creating your own bases more than like all right, basing, yeah, whatever, it's kind of a necessary evil most of the time, but like for you, is that something that you take particular joy in?
I think that's sort of grown on me. I do take a lot of joy in it. And I've sort of grown on that because with Aaron Lovejoy and some other friends, we've really worked on trying to tell a story when you have a miniature, because when you're playing armies and stuff, you just have to base 200 guys, and so it's throw on a few rock pebbles and grass tuft and you're good. But it's sort of hard I think you can help the viewer if they can look at your miniature rather than just a guy just standing there. Why is he standing there? Mm-hmm. So if you can add little things that help tell your story, I think that's a lot more fun. And you have layers of discovery where if the viewer looks pretty close to my bases, typically you can find other things that, sort of reward you for taking time to look.
Absolutely. Especially with pieces like Training Day, there's so much in that, from the freehand to, the dummy being destroyed, all, like that. It's just, not only do you have like little surprises, but you also have motion captured in kind of like a snapshot, which is a very, very, very impressive. It's hard to do in the miniature world, because a billion people have tried to make realistic smoke effects, and they don't, a missile firing or something like that. It's like, it looks cute, but it's not quite, it
right.
Never quite gets there. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So anything I can do to help increase the story. So I added a braid to her hair. So as she's spinning around, you can see the movement of the braid. There's movement of um, the dummies and the straw coming out. The flag behind actually has a little bit of movement from her moving around. So it's adding all these little pieces that help tell the story a little bit better.
Now, how did you come up with that piece? Now, what we'll do is we'll post a picture of that as well, so our listeners can kind of get a point of reference as well, and link to any social medias that you have. But can you talk to us a little bit, maybe because that's kind of a more well-known piece, what maybe the process was, where you came up with the idea, and kind of maybe walk us through the story of creating that piece.
Absolutely. So starting out, I kept going to the Reaper cons, and then I'd never entered a actual Reaper piece so that I would be eligible for a Sophie. And it was always one of my goals to end up with a Sophie at some point. And so I needed to find a miniature that I could use and sort of tell a story with. And so I started looking through. And with GW, they make it very easy because there's lots of lore and literature and heraldry and things you go through their books and things that you can add. And so I started searching for things that Reaper may have written or had that would help pass that story along. And finally found one of their old catalogs. There were Sisters of the Blade. And they actually had a little logo with 3 weapons in it. And that's on the back of the piece. And so okay, now I had some piece to do, some little bit of heraldry and a little bit of story. And so then I had to find a female miniature, and then I found the girl, and says, okay, now what can I do? She's, swinging 2 swords. So that's interesting, but what is she swinging the swords at? And so then I thought, it'd be fun if she did some dummies to hit against, and sort of thought of Kung Fu Panda, where he's standing on the pegs, and then it started to evolve from there. And so then I knew I needed to have something to hang the dummies from, and I wanted to be in sort of like a dojo, and I needed to have some pegs for her to balance on, and it just started to grow from there. And it went, I did quick drawings real quick with the guys at the store, and sort of bounced it off of them, and then we drew up a basic idea, and then started putting it together. And then you put it together, and then you make changes. And then you build something and you tear it apart and you make changes again. And I intended to enter it the year before I entered it, but I didn't finish it. And Joe Orteza happened to be there that year. And so we talked about things and made some more modifications. And I built the entire roof, and it just didn't look right. And so then I had to start over and try a different method. And so I think that's sort of the process.
Oh, I'm smiling. I know people can't see, because I feel the pain. I know the one of the pieces I entered in a champagne glass. That was the 12th champagne glass, I think. That of different iterations of what it was going on. So I feel I always love hearing people that do the same thing.
Yeah, I love that piece. I actually got to judge your piece in the open, and then I enjoyed your champagne piece. And from what I understand, it didn't come home with you.
It did not. No, they kept it, which was awesome. It was. I
think that's a very nice compliment that they absconded with your piece, because it was pretty awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, it was that. Like I said, I was just blown away with the results. Like, I didn't even I kind of was like, after I heard bronzes, I was kind of like, all right, well, that's all good. Like, it didn't happen this year. It's fine. It was my first one, so I was really kind of, when it all kind of panned out, I was just like, Eric Swinson slapped me once. He's like, Mike, they just called your name. And I'm like, what? No, there's another Mike. He's like, dude, go. I'm like, all right.
Dude, go.
Well, because, Eric said perennial millennial. He's this, no matter what, he's on the phone all the time, So I was, it's interesting, but thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I also set that piece on fire as well. which was awesome. The to do the resin pour, I had built everything else, so the last thing I was doing was the resin pour, and this was Monday before ReaperCon. And so
of course you have to wait to do resin right before the event.
Well, I did UV, so I did it ultraviolet.
Oh, okay,
so
that's
like, I was like, I knew. Yeah, I had Proctor was yelling at me for like 2 weeks before. He's like, "Have you done the resin pour?" I'm like, no, I have not touched it. And he didn't. He had not seen the piece, but he kind of knew what I was doing. I was trying to keep him, as out of it as possible, so he didn't feel like awkward or anything. And then I used a lighter to try to get the bubbles out, and I had already put the paper plants in, and they went woof like that from the light, like this. I actually like I looked to make sure the glass didn't melt any of the. I did a little damage to one of the barrels, but that was fixable. I was like, okay, it survived. And then I laughed for like 45 minutes because I'm like, I didn't even think of that. So I'm glad I had a couple other plants I could replace them with, but I was just like, that was I didn't foresee that coming, And so it was funny to explain. I'm like, this went from on fire to being in Reaper's gallery. Like there you go. It's a win for sure. But yeah, and now if I remember correctly, did you judge the Lancelot piece, the steampunk piece?
I did judge the steampunk piece.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. And I'd say, actually, one of the things I've been thinking about when we talked about doing this interview was how to kind of ask questions about how you kind of approached it, doing the judging, and then kind of in context of that piece, to try to give listeners like kind of how a judge's mind works, when looking at a piece. It's kind of I'm not sure how successful this line of questioning will be, but we'll give it a shot.
No, I think it's actually a pretty valid line of questioning, and it will be helpful to a lot of people. I think number one is you need to read the rules. Mm-hmm. Most open categories, it means it's open. But for Reaper, open category is for modifications to a miniature with and with emphasis on sculpting. So there's most of the points are given to your sculpting techniques and stuff like that. And so I think any contest is very important to read the rules and make sure that you're sort of complying with them, and you'll understand how the judges judge. For the Reaper contents, since you're competing against yourself, everything is given a percentage, and depending on which category you've entered. So if you enter painting, they don't really, bases are cool and they make the miniature look better, but they're not putting a lot of judging on your base work. Mm-hmm. They're putting more on the painting skill to make everything look good, especially the miniature. So, and as a judge, I think we basically have the charts in front of us, and we're rating things based on how they're ranked.
And that's an interesting point to point out too. And I misunderstood the open painters distinction, and I think I probably was reading the Reaper description with other descriptions of opens in my head at the same time, and thinking because the base was scratch built, and that was kind of where my mentality was. Okay, well, everything on this base is scratch built. The bricks weren't molded, but I laid every brick by hand, and then the gear tree was done. So I thought that classified it for open, not thinking in the context of modifying the miniature per se. You know what I mean? So that's where, and so like when it was explained to me that because I was kind of approached that it got moved from open to painters because of that, it kind of was approached to me very gingerly, and I was like, oh no, that clearly is my mistake. I misunderstood the rules, but it's a learning experience, and so it's interesting. It's funny too, because I just went to another competition. I didn't actually enter anything, but the open division at this competition was exactly what you described. It's not painters, but everything else, you know,
Right. Yeah.
you know, and so it's interesting, the way the reading rules, how important it is and such. And certainly like while in that situation, the rules actually aided my piece in the dioramas, because the painting I was told was probably a high silver, but the rest of it was a high gold. And so
Absolutely. Yes.
you know, and so
The-
that in the end helped me, because creativity and execution were higher than the painting and diorama.
Creativity, execution, and storytelling. That's exactly what they're looking for in diorama. And so that's why it's weighted a little bit more. So, you know, and truthfully, the miniature would have, we actually asked Michael Proctor during the judging, okay, does he want 2 silvers or does he want a gold? He goes, he wants a gold.
Yes.
It was like, it was not even a pause. It was just like, give the boy a gold.
Yes. Yeah. That was correct. And, you know, and it's funny. That's there's a running joke in the house, because, you know, that put him in the Lancelot piece in the same category as the dollar store Jack Jack. And so that's that my middle child, the youngest child, are constantly, poor Jack Jack, so disrespected, you know, like
Poor Jack Jack.
poor Jack Jack. And I'm like, no, Jack Jack was a great there. I was like, I was highly successful with trips to the dollar store this year, you know, because the champagne glass was the dollar store, Jack Jack was from the dollar store, you know. So woohoo, that's who I need to get to sponsor this show, right? Okay, so given that context of where like looking at the rules, etc., and in evaluating a piece, kind of how do you start? Like, so you're like, okay, everything's out, here are the pieces, go judge. Your first piece is in front of you. Kind of how do you start this process?
So all 3 of us sort of, some people you can enter more than 1 entry, and the judges, the first thing is to figure out if there's more than 1 entry or not. And if there's more than 1 entry, then we decide what we think is the best of the entries they've entered. And then once we've settled upon that, all 3 judges agree, then we begin to look at the miniature and be more critical and see what we can do. For the open contest, it's mainly sculpting. So we're identifying what the original miniature was, and then see what they've done and how well executed it is. In that situation, if you can't tell there's a conversion, that's a win. And that's typically a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then looking at how everything is executed and how, you know, cleanly it is done, and then we'll look at the other things like the paint jobs. You still rate those things, and you rate the basing and the storytelling and how the whole thing makes you feel, and then when you get difficult ones, we'll actually put the chart in front of us. And okay, so you get 30% for painting. Mm-hmm. These aren't the right numbers. I'm just using numbers out of the air here. But so if 30% is for painting, how much of the 30% did they get? And then you sort of add things up and see if we get, see how they rank on, bronze, silver, gold. And then painters division is sort of the similar thing, except for instead of looking at the sculpting, you're really particular about the painting.
Mm-hmm.
And, if there's definite errors in the painting that, knocks you down, and, and so that's sort of the process there.
Now, and it's interesting. One of the, and you'll know this very well, also being a fan of Banshee as well, is that how much does like smoothness play necessarily into are you looking for the quality of blends, or are you looking for I don't know, I guess because there's so many different absolutely amazing painters do both. They get the smooth blend, they get the artistic interpretation and excellent technique, etc. But we're not talking about those chumps. We're talking about like the everyday sucky people like me. So if you're starting out and you're entering competitive pieces with the judging mindset going on, where do you focus on? Do you focus on the kind of that technique of the learning the super blend, or do you focus more on the artistic side of it? I guess I hope that's making sense in that question.
Well, it makes absolute sense, especially if you're talking about Banshee, and we know he has his favorite saying about a bad word blends. And but if you look at his stuff, it is blended.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry. I know he doesn't, but he says he doesn't, but even though he takes an artistic approach, everything still ends up looking proper.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think that's important. I think that something that's been a high learning curve for me is, respecting light. So, and basically it's just, and you have to go from dark to light. And sometimes it's hard to do the blends, but you can generally figure out where the lightest part should be and where the darkest part should be. And then it's a matter of going in between.
Right. Yeah. Oh no. I don't know if you have heard of Zumakito miniatures. He's this guy with a massive, impressive beard, but he was on the show and we were talking exactly like that. He's like, no, there's no F smoothness. F him, because all of his stuff is completely smooth, and it's always the running joke that we were having, like Dan and I always have, is that of course, like, some of these people don't compete anymore and competitions mean nothing to them as they're sitting on their iron throne made of Slayer swords,
right. It's just they just show up and kick babies. That's what it is, man. It's just
exactly. So I'm trying to figure out how to ask a question about, like, so you judged my Lancelot piece, and I'll be honest, and so just to give you about a little bit about who I am, I started academic/policy debate when I was 12 years old, and I'm still actually coaching here into my 40s, coaching it. I have miles thick skin and can take the harshest criticism out there, so you never have to worry about my only policy. And I do this with my students too. I'm like, if you want to tell me I suck, just tell me why. That's it. Yeah. Just tell me why so I can get better. I don't care if you the language doesn't matter. It's the end result that matters to me. And so
it's hard to get to that point, though.
It absolutely. And I felt like I had to redo that. A couple of years ago, I kind of had an emotional train wreck with a piece at the Nova Open. And that actually almost killed the podcast before it even started. And like, I was ready to hang up the brushes after all of that stuff. But I've got much better now. And, a nice long hour session with a therapy session with Vince Venturella helped a bit.
That's true.
But so I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask about my piece that you looked at, the Lancelot piece. And if you had any thoughts or anything that came kind of to mind, just because you don't have it in front of us. It's been a month now since ReaperCon, so I wouldn't expect you to be like, Mike.
I remember it. I complimented you, if you remember, as
I do,
getting your award, because it was cool. I know that guy judged his piece and it was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I think the thing is, as a teacher and a person that wants to make people better, you sort of have to ask people, what type of criticism do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Because some people just want to go, oh, it was pretty, and they're happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not interested in changing anything. They want to get better, but they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I feel the same way too, because I was at dinner with who's the guy you interviewed him, and he paints for Privateer Press.
Eric,
yeah,
Eric Svensson, bearded,
yeah, Eric Svensson, yeah. So we were at dinner with him, and he actually judged my my diorama piece, and I ended up getting silver, which I was a little sad about that, which we all are. And so, but I had to remind myself, okay, I want to learn about it. And so, okay, let's ask him what he thought. And he goes, I kept wanting to look at her a different way, because I've got a girl that's running through some water in a train station. And he goes, I kept turning the model and I wanted to look at her a different way. And I'd done the model a long time ago, and and I knew I wasn't going to finish my main piece. And so I just said, well, I can refresh this model because I've never entered it at Reaper. And so I hadn't really, I've learned some since then. I hadn't really thought about viewing at it. And he says, I wanted to see her running the other way. And so I think, oh, okay. So I had to think about it. I went back and looked at it. I was like, oh, he's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and if you ever talk to Michael Proctor, you can attest, he can attest to this, that I want no smoke blown up my ass. I want to get better. And so, if something looks good, that's nice to hear, but I want to also hear how it goes from good to great. You know what I mean? I want to hear,
yep.
And if something sucks on a piece and I can't see it and somebody else does, I need to know,
So good. So that sounds like you'd like to grow. And I'm not too harsh either, but some people just don't want any criticism. So I think it's important as a good friend and someone who wants to help somebody is to really find out, where they want to go. And I think that's helpful. With your piece, the base work is just absolutely amazing. The bricks were laid out with so much care and just looked just totally real and perfect. I mean, it was just,
thank you.
Really love that. And then for the model, was there any conversion on the model itself? I think you'd mentioned a couple things in your description.
Just small, nothing. There were nothing major. There was some kind of flaws with the piece, like there was kind of a typewriter thing with a paper coming off, and the paper was mutilated when it came to me, so I took it off and put it, rolled out a piece of green stuff and made it my own, and kind of it's a different shape than what the manufacturer did. So it was just minor stuff like that. Like I said, when I put it in open, I thought it was for the base qualified it for it. So that, yeah, the rest of it was tweaking, not even worth mentioning, most of it.
But those are still all considered conversions to the model, and we couldn't tell what they were. So that's really good sign.
Oh, thank you.
All of that was executed very well. And I think for especially Reapers open contests, it's useful to put in pictures and good descriptions of what you've done, so that you can make the judge's life a little bit easier instead of them guessing. And a lot of times, if we know the name of the model, on good models, we'll take time to look it up online and see if we can see what the original looked like and see what changes they made. And that's good. I think it was, I've learned from a lot of painters stuff. It's always good to use things, you don't have to sculpt something necessarily if you can find something that looks like what you want. So why waste the time doing it? And so I can see that for the planter, you'd repurposed a pipe from a faucet, or it's a braided pipe, and so is very clever. For me, I recognized it right away, so maybe need a little bit something to hide that a little bit.
Probably.
But I think most people probably wouldn't notice, but I've done lots of plumbing repairs, so to me it was pretty obvious. I think the thing that got the most was the connection of the tree to the back of the discs on the tree, the gears on the tree.
Right.
So gears, I mean, the whole thing appeared perfectly, but then upon close examinations, it looked like they were hot glued or something to the tree or something. Or
yeah, it was green stuff, but I could see totally why it looked like. That was actually the biggest struggle with my model, was figuring out how to get the gears on there to stay. Yeah, I totally like when you say it looked like hot glue. Yep, you're probably right. It was green stuff, but I can certainly see how that translates to hot glue.
Right. So yeah, it was either green stuff. So there were just a couple small things, and it was the model was perfectly fine. Obviously, I mean, this whole thing was high silver, so it was just, when you're doing gold, it's like, okay, what are the things that knock you away from gold, or what pushes you into the gold category? And so you're looking for those things. And then when you have obvious things like my girl running the wrong way and not appearing right in the scene, that's an obvious thing to not give me gold. So I think it's the little things that they have to get at contests, is you have to start getting a little picky. Whereas, the whole model is just beautiful and people would pay a lot of money for it. And I'd be happy to have it in my collection if you want to send it my way. But I'm just saying that, when you have to do awards and you're judging amongst things and putting things side by side, you do have to make some little decisions, and little things like that, sometimes hurt you.
Right. Absolutely. And it's funny because it was, there are things in it that I was excited about that I never thought I would be excited about. Like, probably one of the best parts of it to me were the pants. Doing the pinstripe pants, I was like, I can't believe I actually pulled that off, and they actually look correct. I was like, I'm stopping now. I'm not painting anything else on it. The pants are perfect.
Oh yeah, there was no doubt paint wise that was 100%. I mean,
it was my first non-metallic bronze attempt, and so it's interesting. It's I think that learning bronze copper is easier to me than silver. Copper and bronze are much easier copper and gold are easier for me to paint than silver is, and I still I feel like I'm moving along with those, but I cannot make any progress on silver for some odd reason. I think it's just that what the base coat is supposed to look like. I can do the shadow, but then I'm stuck. You know what I mean? And I think it's probably because when you're painting copper and gold, you're painting kind of a color as opposed to silver. If that makes sense. You're kind of painting a yellow, you're kind of painting a reddish, kind of orangish, pinkish thing going on with copper. So, but I don't know if that made any sense. People are probably scratching their head going, what the hell is he talking about? Silver's a color too.
I think with copper, it's more shifting that mid-tone up to most of it, and then you have a highlight. And so then you have to have a little bit of a pink area, and then lots of mid-tone, and then it goes quickly to dark, and then having those highlights.
Right. Yeah. It's
interesting.
Go ahead.
With the silver, I just watched Miniatures Den. He just did a demo on this thing, and within a few minutes, he painted it black, and then he sprayed zenithal white, and then he just started putting in sketching really quick, and it was amazing how quickly he did it. It was just
yeah, and I haven't watched any of his stuff in a while, but the one I've been watching lately is Jose Da Vinci, and although it's all in Spanish, his process kind of makes sense to watching it. I don't know, it's kind of weird. I've gone on to Banshee's Twitch streams where they're only doing Spanish, turned off the sound, and just watch them paint. Just so I can watch people paint all the time. I hence the reason probably of the 4 days of ReaperCon 3, of which I wore Bob Ross shirts. So, it's those things that interest you. Okay. So now kind of, we've talked a little about the judging, about the piece. Let's do kind of a little bit of a lightning round for you, because you've been in this miniature painting business a while. So some of these things, will probably be common, or you've probably graduated past them, but basically the gist is, I'm going to blurt out a question and you give me an answer as quick as possible. And we just keep going. It's like 5 or 6 questions. How about that? I don't know if you've heard our lightning round yet or not.
I have.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. Okay. Brush licking, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm working on stopping.
It is an addiction, right? Okay, so then when was the last time you drank your paint water?
It's actually been a while, but I definitely done that by accident. And I try to mix my cups up now so that I don't do that anymore.
All right, well then when was the last time you rinsed your brush out in your drink?
Yes, a lot. It's probably been about a month. So
Nice. Okay, so the lords of the brushes come down and descend, and so you may paint with only one paintbrush for the rest of your life. What type of brush is it and what size?
I'm in your camp. Definitely a Sable #1. And what's our favorite brush here?
Raphael. Right?
Raphael, there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Ninja
so probably
Turtle.
I do like the 8404s, but I do use 8408s also.
Yeah, absolutely. When the ones that I found are pretty close and actually have a little bit of a sharper point are the Rosemary and Company Series 8s. I ordered those accidentally, and I actually am pretty stoked by them. I was surprised. They kind of have that fat Raphael fat belly on them with the sharp point. They're softer though. They don't have the same snap as like a Raphael does. And so they're, you know, if you're a snapback kind of person, they're going to be terrible for you. But for soft touches, they're good. Okay. Yep. So next lightning round question: acrylic, a hard body. Start again. Next one is heavy body acrylics, inks, model paints, or another type of paint that is not listed.
I would say model paints would be number one.
Yeah. And you know what? And I appreciate that you said recipe, because I know so often many YouTubers start out, well, the recipe doesn't matter. And I'm like, damn it, I don't know my colors yet. The recipe is vitally important to me, you know?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because, well, I do use the heavy bodies too, so I won't discount them, but I would prefer the model paints. Aaron Lovejoy, I'd ask him all the time, what did you do to paint that? And he goes, I don't know. It doesn't matter. And so I've been working on, okay, how can I get to the point where my recipes don't matter and it doesn't, and I can say it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And I've really been working on that, and it's made a difference.
Has it really? That's interesting, because I don't, you know, it's one of those things that I guess maybe that's just down the road for me, that I'm just not at that point that because I've really only been back in the hobby and painting seriously for probably about 4 years. Like I did a year where I tried to be a gamer when I came back to the hobby, but I think really seriously painting probably about 4, maybe even 5 years. But I maybe it's a laziness thing too. I just love being able to reach for, oh wait, that bottle is pre-mixed, I don't have to worry about it, and I can tweak it here and there, you know. But so it's interesting that how is it, like, what do you think it's done to help you being able to move towards that and just mixing colors and not worrying about it per se?
I don't worry about, I mean, I do write recipes down sometimes, but most of the time it's just coming in and finding it, because you can make it work. It's like, if you took Banshee's class, he probably went to somebody's miniature and he took blue or something and smeared it on the side. Mm-hmm. And that's what he did with Caleb. He came up to him and he just like put a big old, okay, fix it.
Fortunately, I think he only does that in his 2-day class. I had him for 1-day class. So I'm glad that didn't happen. I would have cried.
I think that you can blend anything. So if you just put some other colors in, and actually that adds more interest. So, you know, step out of your box a little bit and try to add in some other colors and bring some more brilliancy and change things up a little bit where, you know, I don't have to have the same red. I can put 2 reds in the same thing and it'll look just fine because I can blend them together.
Nice. Yeah.
So by not getting yourself so stuck on, I need to go from A to B, and having some other stuff in there actually makes a lot more interesting paint job, I think.
It sounds like a more fun paint job too. It sounds like you can be a little more relaxed when painting if you're not really worried 100% about the, oh my goodness, this doesn't exactly match, or you know what I'm saying, like it kind of gives you some freedom to play with it too. Okay, well that makes sense. Maybe I'm a little bit of a convert, I'll say.
I don't think you need to I don't think you need to think of it as much as you know, I'm stuck or it's gonna be too hard to do. I think you just don't worry about it as much.
Yeah, I'm a little OCD with stuff, so but so one of the questions I'd love to ask, and I'm sure you've heard it before, is are there models out there, or is there a model out there that you would like to see made that hasn't been made? I use the Stephen King Dark Tower series characters as an example. I'd love to see Roland Deschaines done, and you know, any of his quartet as miniatures. What about you? Is there something out there that you hope gets made?
There's always lots of great stuff. I do a lot of research before I paint things, because I try to find color things that help me out, or and I do like to sculpt a lot of scenes that maybe people have done. For a lot of GW things I've done, you know, the cover art, I've made the models to go with the cover art. And so there is a girl pirate sitting on a barrel that I like to do, and I think I will sculpt her at some point. And then there was a James Wapple 2D drawing that I thought would be really nice, turned into a model. So,
oh, nice, that's cool. You know, it's always, there's so many things out there, and it's my bet is at some point they'll all be STLs anyways, right? Because every time I turn around, I've said something to somebody, and like, there's an STL for that. I'm like, oh, all right, cool, because I got the Quicksilver from the Silverhawks. Somebody did an STL for a mini. I was like, hell yes.
And that was on your list too. So that's perfect.
Right. Exactly. I was no longer on there, and then I saw Steven Garcia's Lionel at the ReaperCon, and I'm like, and I was actually supposed to meet him, and I'm texting him. I'm like, Steven, I am the guy standing next to your Lionel wearing a Thundercat shirt. How can you not find me?
Like, bring it.
Yeah,
it's almost as if you planned that one.
Right. That would have worked well if we did. So another thing I like to ask is, the motto, the official motto of the podcast is better, braver, happier painters. Is there any advice that you can give to our listeners as they continue their journey down this road?
I think it's not being discouraged and searching for things that will help you get better and be willing to change and try different things. So we don't get stuck on very difficult things. Whenever I entered Golden Demons, I would always look at the guys and they'd look at the magazines that came out and they'd try to find, okay, which category was the worst? Because I'm going to enter that one. So I want to try to get one of those demons. And so Lord of the Rings really sucks. So I'm going to do Lord of the Rings entries. And I always decided I'm entering the hardest category, which was 40K single or fantasy single. And there's lots of years I didn't get anything, but when I did win, I was playing against the big boys.
Yeah.
So, it was my goal to always, okay, that's the hardest category, but I really have to bring it. And so it just makes you try harder because you know that those guys are going to throw down.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one always things that amazes me when I see a Slayer sword winner is a single model. I'm like, holy crap, because how do you a single model over some of the dioramas that people do? You know what I mean? That's best in shows that aren't dioramas are always impressed the hell out of me, especially like if a bust wins best in show. I'm like, that's some stuff going on there. You got some mojo. Now,
Exactly.
you've won and this actually has nothing to do with the quality of painting. I'm just curious. I saw that you've won 2 demons, or
I have 4.
Okay. I'm going to chide you a little bit because where your paint and putty account is empty. We need more Brice Cocanour stuff on social media. We need places to find you, man.
I do have to admit, I am very poor at at sharing my stuff and taking time to put it on, on social sites. I have a hard time getting my entries done so I can actually enter the contest. So that's, but I do have, I have things. I have of work, and then I, in church, and I've been a scoutmaster for a long time, and I coach pole vault, and so I do. Trying to fit everything in, just like probably coaching all those kids and stuff takes up some extra time and stuff. So, but because of this interview, I promised myself that I would take some time and put some things on my Instagram and such. And I do have a putty and paint account. I've just not put anything on it. So
right. No, I found the putty and paint account. I'm like, I see 0 projects.
I think it's more of a photography issue, not being able to take good pictures and trying to figure out which lens I want to buy. So that's one of my goals.
Oh yeah, I struggle too with photography. That's why I actually don't really enter online contests, because we paid all this money for my son. He's a huge into photography, and I'm like, dude, take good pictures on miniatures. He's like, yeah, Dad, I took this dramatic angle and look at the lighting and shadow. I'm like, no, I just need straight up pictures of my miniature.
I can't see it.
Right, exactly. He's like, but look at the way the light shines off the base. I'm like, it doesn't matter.
That rock on the base looks awesome, though.
Right, exactly. Well, okay, so you're going to work on your social media following, which is great, because I believe that once you do, you're going to get overrun with followers, because you're an absolutely fantastic artist, Brice. I really enjoyed picking through Facebook and seeing the pictures of your work, and I knew you had done a stitch thimble door for box, whatever you call for Reaper, box art. I don't know what they call it, because they don't really do boxes most of the time. But that's a beautiful. I actually love that piece as well. I love the blade, the glowing blue blade on it. It's done really well.
That was terrifying. Ron's like, I need a glowing blade. And I was like, I've never done glowing blades before. Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, that seems to be the way he works, for sure. But it has been an absolute joy having you on and getting a chance to talk to you. And I really appreciate you taking the time. It sounds like you are crazy, crazy busy too. So I can empathize with that. And I'll make sure that we'll say social media under construction. Keep tuned for more from Brice Cocanour. But thank you so much for being on, my friend.
Just hope to encourage everybody not to get discouraged, and you can do it and keep moving on. I love that you guys are promoting this and trying to help people be encouraged that they can do it and they can accomplish great things.
Thank you very much. Dan and I would like to thank Brice Cocanour for joining us today. It was a really insightful interview, and it's always wonderful to get to know artists that you've seen their work before, and you're like, wow, now I get to place the face and the name and hear about their thought process to such things as their wonderful pieces like Training Day, etc. Brice, thank you so much for sharing your hobby journey with us, and we look forward to checking out your work in the future and hopefully future conversations. You can find Brice on Paint and Putty and also on Instagram. While he doesn't have a ton of social media presence right now, that's okay. He'll work on it at some point. But you can also, a nice little trick to find his work is that he's put in a lot of different pieces to different years in ReaperCon. And so if you go to the ReaperCon.com and check out the Master Series Open, they have galleries, and you can just search for his name and see all the beautiful pieces that he has done in the past. So we'll also put a link to all his stuff in our show notes. Again, thank you so much, Brice. It really was a fantastic conversation. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Listening to Paint Dry. I know our YouTube channel is a little bit behind. I promise I will have that all up to date by the end of the year. You can also follow us on Twitter at Dry Listening. Like, subscribe, or follow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you wouldn't mind, as a Christmas present for the podcast, if you could leave us a good review and spread the word about the show, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much to all of our listeners out there. You really are absolutely amazing. Anyways, with all that said and done, take your time, be patient, and you will become a better, braver, happier painter. Until next time. Listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan is a production of LTPTWMD. All rights reserved. No portion of this recording may be used without the express written consent of the host. The music is Death by a Thousand Questions by Springtide. Download from the Free Music Archive on a non-commercial attribution share-alike basis. All views and opinions expressed in the show are solely the views and opinions of the person who said them. All celebrity voices, if any, were impersonated and done so poorly.